Hello everyone, welcome back to the life of Harry Ferguson. Last time we went through everything from his birth up and down, to his expulsion kinda from school, to his finding his tribe in Belfast. He did a bunch of other cool stuff. If you haven't, go back and listen to that banger of an episode. Now, however, to steal a line from my inspiration to be a podcaster, the rest is history. The storm clouds of war are gathering. So, what does young Harry do? Well, given his abilities for madcap ideas, his massive successes in making a name for himself, and his willingness to put himself out there, so to speak, it won't surprise you to learn that almost as soon as the war starts, the Irish Board of Agriculture, who have been tracking his rising fame with intense interest, commission him with the task of finding ways to boost food production within Ireland itself. This, as what would become known as World War I, was the first time such a world-shattering event had affected Ireland so dramatically. So the government were forced to figure out ways they could possibly get around the lack of continental harvests and the complete closure of import and export routes. People need to eat, you know. This puts Harry back in the place he spent so much effort and time trying to escape, the farm. This time, however, not as a slight, overworked farm labourer, but the respected, sharpened mind of an engineer. And here we get to the moment that would catapult the idea of Harry Ferguson from crazy inventor and adrenaline junkie to world-changing engineering genius. The tractors he looks at this time are essentially mechanical horses. Massive heavy engines dragging ploughs behind them on loose, barely there chains or simple drawbars. If you watch this in action, more often than not, you see the lethal pivot effect. If the plough happens to snag on a hidden root, rock, or other similar obstacle, the entire tractor halts in its tracks, literally, rears up like an unruly stallion, and flips violently back on top of the driver. As you can well imagine, this instantly crushes many of them under tons of metalwork, and brings to many death. Not the kind of thing that would pass 21st century health and safety inspections, that's for sure. Now, you might think that you should simply make the tractors heavier to gain more traction. However, Harry quickly realises that all this does is cause a quicker and more certain death, when even more tons of metalwork would fall on the unsuspecting farmer than previously. As a result, Harry puts his thinking cap on. As we've seen, Mr. Ferguson has quite a productive thinking cap, and eventually he devises possibly the single greatest invention in farm safety of all time, the Ferguson System. What was it? Well, essentially, the 3-point hitch, combined with hydraulic draft control. Even as I type that, I'm like, what? Plain speak, please. The 3-point hitch part is a triangular linkage fitted to the back of tractors, 2 lower arms and 1 upper arm that, when slotted into holes or grooves in the plough, physically connect them. As a result, Ferguson's invention changed the plough and tractor from 2 implements linked by a chain to a single rigid unified machine. Now, when a plough attached to this hitch hits a rock or a root or something, instead of flipping over and turning Farmer Dan to Pancake Dan, the force no longer focuses on the low point, the back wheels, to flip the tractor. Instead, by a miracle of science, physics to be precise, the front wheels are thrust down further into the dirt. The weight of the plough itself then puts downward pressure on the rear wheels, meaning that the farmer who would have been crushed by his tractor is instead just, hopefully temporarily, kinda stuck. Better to be kinda stuck than kinda dead, isn't it? And now we get on to that weird term, hydraulic draft control. In Harry's invention, the top link of the hitch is connected to a valve inside the tractor. So if we go back to the rock or root scenario, When the pressure comes, the force is transferred to the top link, which instead of being a solid bar, is mobile enough to press down on a spring, coiled in the linkage. That spring popped the hydraulics, which lifted the plough enough to avoid a fatal tangle. Essentially, it was a mechanical nervous system, allowing the plough to respond to a stimulus. Automatic depth control. George Ferguson's invention allows tractors, which now no longer rely on frontal weight to keep steady, to become lighter, thereby reducing fuel consumption and manufacturing costs, among many other benefits. Very quickly, Harry realises that building a handful of prototypes in Belfast isn't going to give the global impact that he and others feel is needed. He needs someone to help him broaden his pool. He wants to go from a huge fish in what was essentially a one-person pond to a small fish in an essentially worldwide pond. Now, if you know literally anything about early automobiles, also known as cars, or even modern ones, you'll have heard of the American that enters our story at this very point, Mr. Henry Ford. In 1938, Harry makes the arduous journey from Belfast to the Fairline Estate in Michigan, in the United States of America, for a requested demonstration of his new invention. Just imagine a former farm boy from County Down being called to a demonstration across the Atlantic by probably the most famous person in the world at this point. Ford, not Ferguson now, Ford, this genius of automobiles, has been trying to build a better, safer tractor for years. So it's hard not to think that he is somewhat jealous of this random guy from the back end of nowhere in Ireland who gets there before him. Once in Fairlane, Ford takes Ferguson to a field. He watches sternly but curiously as Harry tinkers with the tractor to make the 3-point hitch, and finally is stunned to see Harry's tractor outwork ones from the estate twice its size. And now, although he could not know it, Harry comes to what could well be the most influential, most important moment of his entire life. If there's anything worth knowing about somewhat stereotypical agricultural types, it is that they often, again stereotypically, have somewhat of a disdain for legalism, official contracts, and other such frivolities. To say this was true for Harry is, as we have seen, an understatement. However, it is also more than accurate to level this sort of accusation at the Michigan maestro, Mr. Ford. Anyhow, in that field in Fairlane, Michigan, a historic agreement is made. The tractors will be designed by Harry and his company, the designs shipped to America, and then the actual fabrication will be in Henry Ford's massive factory. This offsets factory keeping and manufacturing costs for Mr. Ferguson. However, the salesmanship, if that's a word, will be done by the ultimate salesman, Mr. Henry George, also known as Harry Ferguson. The beginning of their partnership is the Ford Ferguson 9N tractor in 1939. It's interesting to note that the Ford name, which realistically would be more world-renowned, is placed first. This is despite the actual design being Ferguson's. Between that and the later 2N model, over 300,000 tractors are produced in a short space of time. By 1946, Harry has absolutely made it. In that year alone, he nets over $4 million. That's a lot of money for a guy expelled from Drumrock Elementary. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go back to my previous episode and find out about Drumrock Elementary. However, jumping ahead that far skips a pivotal moment in the history of Mr. Harry Ferguson. On the 21st of September 1945, Henry Ford retires from the Ford Motor Company and transfers the presidency to Henry Ford II. This, for Harry, would turn out to be absolutely earth-shaking. And on that bombshell of a cliffhanger, that is actually where we'll leave it for now. Comment what you like or didn't like about this episode. Follow me at Lean Blake Podcaster on Instagram, and most importantly, tell everyone about the History and Heritage podcast. Goodbye.